distance of more than 300 miles.
Early morning at Parham Airfield near Framlingham. By 6:30, preparations for the flight in the Shadow microlight were well underway. Pilot Peter Davies did his bit, making last-minute adjustments to the tailplane. Designer and manufacturer David Cook poured in the petrol for a practice flight. The plane would need 21 gallons for its record-breaking run. The cockpit may look rather basic, but flying a microlight takes great skill. The two-stroke 50 horsepower engine soon warmed up and Peter Davies prepared for a practice run. The Shadow already holds the microlight world speed record. Designer David Cook explained why he now wanted to try and beat the distance record as well.
It's in repayment to Peter Davies, the pilot. He's our company test pilot. He did a full flight test on this aircraft for absolutely nothing, and he's a freelance man. In repayment, he wanted to take a world record.
Are you worried that he might not make it to Land's End, or are you confident about the flight?
I'm terribly worried, yes. It's like putting all what you've done on the line and saying, here we are we good or aren't we? I never believe anything till I see it happen.
The Shadow, which is built by David Cook at Leiston, seemed to have no trouble landing after the brief practice, and the pilot was certainly happy with the plane's performance.
Very smooth. We've got a different prop on for speed, which means we can reduce the power considerably for cruising, and it was working very well. It's flying very nicely. Just fill it with fuel, put the helmet on and go.
And what sort of speeds will you be going at?
Well, actual speed indicated will be about 75 to 80 miles an hour. But the actual speed we cover the ground will depend on what sort of wind we have. If we have a tailwind, it pushes along the ground faster. With a nose wind, we slow down. So we're hoping for a tailwind the majority of the way, so we can get there faster.
Looks a bit cramped in there, aren't you? A bit worried about what it's going to be like on the journey?
No, it's cosy. There's as much room in here as a standard glider, and they've done thousands of hours, people in gliders doing long distances. It's quite pleasant. You've got lovely view when you're flying around. There aren't any drafts coming through here, so I should be all nicely tucked up in here, enjoying the view.
A barograph was installed to log the flight details and ratify the distance. Certainly the conditions were right for the flight. The wind was slight and the sky was bright. But as the aircraft steamed down the runway, there was tension amongst the sturdy souls who braved the early morning cold. Then the microlight took off safely into the sun at the start of its 4-hour journey to the southwest. Peter Davies landed at St Just Airfield at 20 to 1 this afternoon, exactly 4 hours after takeoff. The old distance record was 189 miles. He smashed that by flying 340 non-stop. He was congratulated by the chairman of the British Microlight Aircraft Association, Tom Stokes.
To Land's End.
Parham Airfield near Framlingham in Suffolk was once the home of World War II American bombers. At dawn today, a very different kind of aircraft was given final checks by designer and builder David Cook before setting off from Parham on a bid to fly direct to Land's End, and in the process to establish a new world distance record for the microlight. Takeoff in perfect conditions was at 7:40, with test pilot Peter Davies at the controls. The Shadow, as it's called, had 21 gallons of fuel on board, giving it a range of 500 miles. The idea of the flight was to prove the microlight's worth as a long-distance carrier. It's now in production in Leiston in Suffolk and has a possible market in third world countries for such things as crop spraying and carrying medical supplies. Exactly 5 hours and 340 miles later, the Shadow touched down at Land's End, almost doubling the previous record of 189 miles held by an American.